Almost live from the CX Therapy Studio, CX Therapy Season 5.
Good morning, Max. How are you doing today?
I am doing fine, doing very well. And good evening, Julien. What's new in your world? How's Paris? How's the City of Light?
You know, I'm always super happy when I get a chance to talk to you and meet other people that we invite on stage. Today, I was looking forward to having this chat, and then just as the jingle starts, I see you dancing in the background. I know that the guests can't see that, but I do, and that just cheers me up. So
Well,
I'm great. I'm great. How are you
Good.
doing?
I'm well. It's a perky song. How can you not dance?
Exactly. The only thing I could complain about, but it's really because I'm French, is the weather is hot. Like today is late May, and it feels like mid-August already. And I don't have AC. That's what I love about the US. You guys have AC absolutely everywhere. At least in California, you do. I need that.
Well, and it's ironic. San Francisco. I live down on the peninsula, but San Francisco, as you get into late May and June, it actually gets cold because the bay gets warmer than the ocean, and that's what brings the fog in. But down here, we have fog nearby, but we don't usually get it directly over us. So that's what makes the Bay Area weather so lovely is San Francisco takes all the cold for us, and we get all the nice weather.
You know, in French, we don't say to chit chat with people. We say talking about the weather. We use that phrase quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I never thought you'd take it that literally. I'm learning something with you every single day, Max. So today we're learning about the weather. Last time we actually learned about Medicare, a topic that I must say I'm not very familiar with, not being American. Did you happen to receive anything in the mailbag about Medicare? Should we look?
Let's take a look.
Now it's time to open this week's mailbag.
All right.
Mailbag.
So what do you have in your laundry bag? In your mailbag?
A letter! Yay! I always feel like Blue's Clues. I don't know if that made it to France or not.
I'm afraid it did not.
So Mike's story last time was about signing up for Medicare and the insane complexity of the process and how important and fraught it all is. If you sign up too late, you literally get money deducted from your Medicare benefit for the rest of your life, and all just other crazy arcane rules. And question we got here on the letter that you can't see with the green screen. So in terms of signing up for Medicare, what could be done to make this stuff easier to understand? How do you put a system in place that would give you better information on the options? And a little bit of background, since I'm not sure how you would answer that, being French, as you said. Most healthcare in the U.S. is privately run. Medicare is a government program that you qualify for when you're 65 years old. And then there are supplementary Medicare programs that typically are run by private healthcare companies. So there's this complexity of the government can talk about what it talks about. It can talk about the rules, but then the vendors all have their own thing. So there's like 87 sources that you can get the information from. I have always felt that there's just an overwhelming need to have someone step up and make it, just to summarize it somehow. There are documents with the full stuff, but they're all like this big. So I just don't find that helpful. I think the issue, and we see this over and over in different things, is there's no nobody clearly owns that problem.
Well, because the overall program, I mean, no one who does really care about this customer. Each individual program that's going to get money from it, yes, they do care, but they are an individual program. So the overall thing, who cares except the people who are concerned? I see 3 ways to fix this. There is the French way, triple the number of government people working on this. Probably 1 out of 3 is actually
That's
going to be
brand
helpful.
in the United States right now, so that's probably not going to happen.
All right. So there is solution number 2. You hire someone with a chainsaw who's going to decide to clean everything up and start from scratch, which actually it's incredibly painful, but probably is a way to do it at some point, because I'm very familiar with this concept where you add complexity over complexity over complexity. 50 years later, no one actually understands anything, because you would have to study the 50 previous layers before it makes any sense. So
Right.
starting from scratch and saying, okay, now we have one program with 5 different flavors that will cover 99% of the needs, and that is going to be clear for everyone. It's probably the right way to go, but you might break everything while doing that. I mean, it happened in the past, right? And there is a third way, which is probably the 2025 way, and not necessarily my favorite, but probably the easiest to pull right now, is to leverage Gen AI a little bit more and say, we have this insane complexity that a human being can't understand, because you would have to read 15 books before you get to the core of it. But the good thing is AI can probably read this 15 books and summarize it and ask you the 20 questions that are necessary to tell you what to do. Not necessarily my favorite options, because I prefer when things are clean, but at this point, I guess we have AI. Why not leverage AI to make it
That's a good
better?
point. I one thought I have, and I don't know how much it helps or hurts. Probably more hurt. Well, I know it hurts. The there are the private providers who are doing the additional services. It is absolutely not in their best interest to have well-informed consumers choosing them. So there's this large incentive to run commercials on TV for those shows that the elderly watch, and get them to call their number and have their people explain things in a way that makes their program the absolutely only thing that makes sense, whether it makes sense or not. It may be, that's kind of an interesting. Judy spent some time in government, so a little tease here. This will be something we could bring her in on, I bet. It, it is there some sort of governmental approach of using generative AI? They're just the technology isn't crazy anymore. It's a knowledge base with some Gen AI and RAG. Are we going to start seeing ask me anything bots on different government areas? And could that work? That would be really.
I mean, it should, because honestly, it's not to ask me anything at this point. It's to ask me about this specific
Within
topic
the
for
domain.
which I have read the entire documentation. A bot should be. You're not talking about a bot that's going to read everything they can find on the internet to provide an answer. You're talking about a bot that has read the book that Mike was talking about the other day, which has every piece of information you need. So normally, artificial intelligence should be doing a brilliant job at this, and it should not be that complex to set up. But it's government, so not that complex still happens to be complex. But
As complex as I'll get out.
since you kind of mentioned we are going to have a guest that happens to know about CX and happen to know about government, why don't we just bring her on stage?
Yes, please.
And now, please welcome this week's guest, a true CX expert.
Hello, Judy.
Good
Hey there.
morning. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, Judy Weader is a peer of mine here at Forrester. She's a CX analyst. I'm gonna dig into your resume a little bit, but there's a thing I have a little bee in my bonnet about that I want to start with. I and Julien and I used to work together at Ring Central, and when I was at Ring Central, I was very guilty of taking our contact center product and going, "Ooh, this is CX." Forrester defines CX very differently than contact center software. So I thought it would be good, since you're so much in the thick of it at Forrester, maybe if you could just talk about how we look at CX and what that means to us and what it encompasses, because it's a term that's there's a new term that is being misused more, which is agentic AI. But I think up until then, it was probably the most misdefined term out there of any. So I think you are as good a source of giving us a real answer to what it is as anybody I know.
Sure. And yes, agentic AI, another term that's being used and abused quite a lot these days. Um, much like just AI in general, like people say AI,
Fair enough.
very
Yeah.
specific, and like AI has been around forever. It hasn't just been around for 3 years. So we should stop pretending that. Yeah, customer experience is the way that we define it is the sum of the perceptions that a customer has about all of the different kinds of ways that they're having experiences with a particular firm. So whether we're talking about an experience is something that's sort of a discrete moment, like a specific touch point, like I called the contact center because I had a specific question and I needed to get the answer to that question, or whether they're going through a journey which has a whole bunch of experiences that are part of it, or whether we're thinking about the entire relationship that they have with a particular firm, and also with a government agency, that can happen as well. Customer experience is the sum of all those things. And one of the fun things that I get to do at Forrester is among all the various things that I cover, I talk about like everything you need to establish, fund, and scale a CX function. So
Mm.
the vision, the strategy, the prioritization, the governance, the ROI of CX. And in that, I write what we call our wave evaluation, which I know you are super familiar with, Max, because you do waves. And I do that for the CX strategy consulting practices. So when I'm looking at it, I do run into that use and abuse as I'm doing the landscape and looking at all the different firms that say they do this before I can even get to the wave. And there's,
Mhm.
yes, we do customer experience. And when you dig into it, it's like, yeah, we build apps and we build websites. And then, oh, honey, no, that's digital experience. That's not, it doesn't mean that you're not working on experience, but you're working on a subset of experiences. The contact center and the experiences that an individual has with them, that's a subset. When I talk about customer experience, it's the whole shebang, because we are still physical beings. And so some of those things are going to be physical connections that we have, whether they're in a store or on a phone. Some of them are going to be, with touching physical things, and some of it is absolutely going to be digital. But it's the sum of all of those things, and it's influenced by so many things that are outside of that individual brand's control, because your experiences are constant, like your perception is constantly being colored by the experience you had with someone else, and you bring that into the very next way that you evaluate every single thing you do. Every app you look at, you're comparing to the last app that you were in, and so on and so forth. So it's experiences is really, really broad, kind of almost atmospheric thing. And then we do our best to try and figure out how all the different ways you could possibly measure it.
So yeah, my favorite example of the breadth that I like to give is the thread count in the sheets in the hotel room. That's part of the customer experience. It's
Yeah.
not something we measure at, or at least, I don't know, maybe somebody in the leisure and hospitality team measures it, but so why don't you be a little more specific on what you cover? Just describe
Yeah.
the exact area you cover. I think that would be helpful,
Yeah,
interesting.
for sure. So I spend a lot
Mm.
of time talking with folks who are at either the beginning of their journey of building a CX function or CX practice, or they're trying to expand what they currently have, or maybe they're trying to reboot it. They're just trying to boost their maturity. So I get to see folks at all areas on the spectrum of CX maturity development, which is really cool. But it also means that there are a lot of folks who need the foundational elements in place, which is why I focus on things like how do you develop a vision that will really guide your firm's overall look at what the ideal customer experience is. Build a strategy that helps you connect that vision and bring it to life in support of the business's strategy, because that's what CX is supposed to be there for, to help support the business to be as successful as possible. From a government perspective, just to sort of set this to the side, how do you get to mission success, right? There's always a way to translate it to the appropriate thing. We talk about governance, like how do you make sure that it's consistent and that everybody's aligned? And then prioritization, how do you make choices about the things you're going to do and what order you might want to do them in? Why are you making the choices that you're making? The ROI of customer experience is really important because I used to be a CX leader. So I know what it's like when you go and hat in hand and you're asking for money because you want to do stuff. And the way I would make the business case now, it's so very different than I made it back then, even though I was on the right track then, but I would have been more forceful now because I know more about how to do that at this moment. And then in addition to writing and supporting clients across all those different areas, all around the world and in all different kinds of business models, including government, I also write about government customer experience. And funny enough, listening to you going through your recap, I write about healthcare consumer experiences. The job that I had just before I came to Forrester, I was a CX leader at a Blue Cross plan. So I understand the insurance world so much better than before I ever got that job. And like you have to be in the belly of the beast to understand it. And then I also used to be in the government, first as a contractor and then later working at the Federal Reserve. So I've got exposure to both of those, which means I get to help those clients extra special or extra more so than I do for other clients, shall we say. I write to them very specifically on top of all the other stuff that I write.
You anticipated my next. I always look up this way when I start a question. I don't know why. You anticipated my next question. I kind of held on.
Yeah.
Normally, I'd start with, "Hey, here's your resume and your background," but
Yeah.
I didn't because I just wanted to get into kind of the CX framework before I started talking about your background. I think what's interesting, there's a lot of interesting things there, but you 9 years at Forrester, long time at Blue Cross, long time Federal Reserve. And I thought I'd just pick on those two a little bit. Those are two very, I was going to say very regulated industry, but I get the government is, I don't know if you call it a regulated, it's the regulator. So I don't know about it's that much deeper in it. But I just compare and contrast the view of customers, because neither one of them even talks about customers in their core, right? They're citizens and patients or something like that. So just how do having been in the belly of two beasts, how does each beast look at customers?
Yeah. I mean, the Federal Reserve is sort of an interesting one because it is more of like a G to G and a G to B kind of organization. It does some things with individuals, but typically on a bigger scale. So things like financial education and back. One of the things that I really love doing, actually, I was able to volunteer a as a mentor for kids that needed to work on their math MCAS, which is one of the standardized tests that we have here in Massachusetts. And so I could go and like spend time with kids and teaching them about math. And more often than not, they weren't actually bad at math. They were bad at having confidence that they were good at math. And so it was just kind of boosting them and getting them to calm down and think about it. And they were good with that. But more often than not, the Federal Reserve has three primary functions. So the first function is going to be really the research. And so you see that showing up in a lot of the stuff that gets brought out to Congress and the things that get published, like the blue books and all the different colored books. And that's really just to help guide the economists around the country to understand, here's what we're seeing in all the different reserve districts. So weird sort of thinking about like who the customers are there. That's kind of sort of like G to B, G to E, if we're going to call education its own thing or whatever, G to G, all that. The next function is going to be on supervision and regulation. And these are the folks that go in and monitor the banks and make sure that they're doing the things they're supposed to be doing. Like their processes are okay. This is where the audit kind of functions happen. This is also where they're making sure they have the right amount of reserves, so they're not potentially skating too thin on the amount of money that they should have sort of set aside. And those folks, so that's definitely a G2B kind of thing. And it's less of a customer and more of a regulatory function. And then the one that I was actually in is more of the financial operations, which is all the deeply unsexy stuff that actually makes it possible for you to go to an ATM machine on any given day and be able to take money out and not have to worry about things. This is the large portion of people who toil away in darkness, sometimes in windowless rooms. And I know this because I was in a room that didn't have any outer windows for many, many years. But they move the money between the banks. They facilitate the moving of money between banks, which is how big settlements happen, things like wholesale payments. They also make sure that the securities are moving the way that they're supposed to, things like the bills, notes, and bonds. And they manage a lot of this stuff, like all that cash that comes in, all the checks that are still getting processed, all the ACH traffic that's happening. They're making sure that all those things are flowing the way that they're supposed to. And there are folks in industry that do some of this, but a lot of it is really done by the Fed. And so like when your bank takes in cash, ultimately that cash is going to end up at the local Federal Reserve Bank for that district. And then they're going to process it. Some of it gets destroyed, some of it gets replaced, whatever. So there's a lot of functions that are happening there. And that's very much like a G2B kind of a thing, because that's, the government supporting all these banks. So their notion of a customer is very different depending upon which function the bank is performing. So there's that. Now, if we look at health insurer, similar kind of problem, lots of different kinds of customers. When we talk about the end consumer, so you, me, Julien, if you ever came over here and suffered our healthcare system, good grief, stay where you are. You're much better off. Many health insurers tend to refer to their customers, the individuals, as members. And some of it is because they want to say, like, you're a card-carrying member, but it's also the mindset of, you're a member, we want to take care of you. In financial services, you'll hear credit unions refer to their customers as members, and banks will refer to their customers as customers. Very, very different mindset. So that's how they think about their consumers. But then they also think about the employer groups that are purchasing the insurance on behalf of their employees. And so those groups, whether they're small group, so based on size of employee population, large groups, depending upon the funding model, all that, they think of them a specific way, and they're dealing with a couple different buyer groups there. They've got the decision makers, they've got the actual business buyer, who's typically someone in HR. There may be a broker called a consultant who stands in between them and gets to decide, like, which offer am I going to slide across the table to you to make a choice about which insurer you want to go with and what the plan's going to look like. And then on top of that, you have stakeholders, people who are not necessarily buying, but who are part of the ecosystem. And depending upon how the insurer looks at it, they may think of them as customers as well, which would be the brokers that they're selling their products and services through, and the healthcare providers who are the ones that are actually delivering the care. Now, my argument was, our customers are only the people who are either purchasing or using our services. Everybody else is a partner, a stakeholder. But if I'm paying you, I'm the customer. And we would pay brokers and we paid providers. And so, like, I think depending upon where you stand in the organization, you may have a different feel for it. Definitely the people in provider relations always said, oh, my customer. And I'm like, we're paying them. We're the customer. But they still think of them as their customer. So again, it really depends.
I'll tell you something. I really want to figure out what kind of story someone who studies CX from end to end, who's worked for a period of time in an office without any window, and who's worked for different government bodies in the US, what could actually happen to you that would be so terrible that you did not find a fix on your own? Because it does look like you've faced quite a few difficult situations already. So if that's okay with you, I would now like to call a story.
Gather around, folks. It's time for guest CX story.
All right. So, Judy, now the stage or the couch, depends on how you like to look at it. The couch is yours, and we'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, the therapy couch. I appreciate that. So if we go back in time, it was actually almost exactly a year ago that I had the enormous pleasure to represent Forrester on stage keynoting at our CX Summit APAC, which is in Sydney. And it's the first time I got to cross the international date line, first time I got to go to the Southern Hemisphere, first time I got to go to Australia, which has been on my bucket list and is still on the marital bucket list. I still need to get my husband with me. So just amazing opportunity. And when I was planning out the trip, I went with, I looked at the different airlines that I could go with, and I'm going to protect the innocent and the not so innocent. I'm just going to refer to them as like airline A, B, C, etc. So airline A, which is the one that I went with, is not one that flies a ton of flights over to Sydney from Boston, but I have optimized a lot of stuff around them because I have status with them. So I decided to fly them, decided to go with the closest to business class that I thought I could get because that's allowable when you're flying halfway around the world. Forrester will at least pay for that, thank goodness. And so I did that, and flying through LAX, which was fine. The flight from LAX to Sydney was a bit rough because, as it turns out, I've now discovered I don't like that particular class. I need to go to actual, like the highest level or something like that. I did not sleep. I arrived in Sydney completely wrecked, like just knackered, absolutely brutal. And so I kind of thought, like, all right, I'm not really looking forward to the flight back, but whatever, I'll figure it out. So I go through the conference, get to meet with clients, get to hang out with my colleagues. It was absolutely amazing being in Sydney. And the morning that I was supposed to leave, after having been there for almost a week, I woke up before my alarm, which happens for some reason when I'm traveling. And I looked at my phone, and there was a text message from Airline A saying my flight had been canceled. Please click here to see your new itinerary. And I went, oh no. Oh, no, 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 no. Because I knew it was going to take me a long time to get home. This isn't like coming home from, even California, it's like 5, 6 hours, whatever. You're home pretty much typically same day if you leave early enough. But this, I knew I was going to be, it was like, 21 hours or something crazy like that to get back. So I looked at the new flight pair, and what they had done was they changed me. So instead of flying at like 9:30 in the morning and getting home at like 8 o'clock at night, the following day, or maybe same day. I forget how the
Same
map
day,
works.
same
I
day.
think it was the same day, calendar wise. I was actually going to be leaving on airline B, going to Honolulu, and then flying on airline C from Honolulu to Boston. And I wasn't leaving until like 8:30 at night. So now you've moved me off by another 12 hours, and now I'm arriving at some point a day after I had expected to. Now, most people would say, like, an extra day in Sydney, that's great. And here's me going, I need to see my kids. I've been away for a whole week. I wanted to get home, and I wasn't really looking forward to the flight over the Pacific because that freaks me out. But whatever. So I thought, like, there's got to be a better way. And I talked with my manager, who thankfully the time difference worked out for me, and he told me I could rebook on another airline. So I went and I looked, and excuse me. And so airline D, because now we're on airline D, airline D had an option that could get me home. The flight was, instead of leaving at like 9:30 in the morning, as my original flight was supposed to be, it was like 10:30 in the morning. So that was going to be fine. And they didn't have anything. They didn't actually have a business class. They didn't have any business class seats or whatever. So I could go first class. I told my boss what the price was. He said that's fine. It was going to be like 10K, but when you factor in the taking out the cost of the flight that was getting refunded to me and everything, it wasn't that bad. And he's like, if you want to get home, let's get you home. It's okay. If you want to stay, you can, but we'll get you home no matter what. So I went ahead and I booked that, and I was like, all right, this is great. So I'm flying first class back to the States. Yes. Awesome. Okay. Back through LAX. It's fine. Flights are basically getting at the same time. Everything is good. So I get myself ready, go to the airport, and then I experience the white glove of the first class. Oh, first class international, man. I really want this so badly. I don't get to do this. So they're white gloving me all the way through. Go hang out in the lounge, go have some breakfast. And so I'm just enjoying life because this is turned around. This is pretty awesome. And I get to the gate and people are waiting and everything's fine. And then it's like getting close to boarding time and nothing's happening. That's fine. And then they said, we'll be boarding late. Okay, no big deal. And time keeps ticking. And then they stop giving us updates. And the next thing I know, everybody starts lining up at the counter. And as someone who's been traveling since I was a very small child, I know what that means. That means that something has gone horribly wrong and probably the flight's been canceled. So I open up the app and sure enough, the flight has in fact been canceled. And they just hadn't announced anything. They told us what was going on. So I look in the app, please tell me there's a way that I can rebook. Okay, there is. I can rebook onto this other flight bouncing through San Francisco, and it's leaving another hour from now. So it's now we're at like 11:30 departure or whatever. That's fine. And it gets me into Boston. Okay, we'll do that. So I tap for that in the app, excuse me, and immediately say like, okay, which gate do I need to go to? Okay, I'm going to go to that gate. And so I just grab my bag and start booking to the other gate. So I'm power walking. And as I'm power walking, I look at the thing, right, I need a seat assignment. It didn't give me a seat assignment. Oh, there are no seats in first class. There are no seats at all
Oh,
on this flight. What? How did they even let me rebook on a flight that has no seats? Like I'm looking at the whole thing and the entire seating chart is gray.
so you basically got put on standby?
I have no idea what actually happened, but I get to this other gate and it's a tiny space. And I'm looking at it, it's filled with people who are already waiting because, of course, these are, Transat heavies. So it's not a small number of people. They're waiting to get on this thing. And I'm standing in this one line and just like waiting for somebody. And ultimately, what ended up happening was after I think about 20-ish minutes of waiting, I finally just flagged down someone and just literally begged. It was just like, I'm so sorry, but please, can you help me? I was on this other flight. It got canceled. Then I was on, excuse me, the next flight, and that's gotten canceled. And now I'm on this flight, but I don't have a seat assignment. And what do I do here? And so she looked at everything and came back to me like 5-10 minutes later. And she said, yes, you're on this flight. I got you a seat. Sorry, it's only in economy. Ugh. So now I went from being in first class to an economy. Okay, fine. I'm not going to be a princess about it. I just want to get home at this point.
Right.
But so it's a 3-4-3 setup. For those of you that know what a 3-4-3 looks like, right? 3 seats on either side, 4 in the middle. And I was in the second in the 4. So I'm in the middle of the middle. She said, I don't think there's anybody sitting next to you, so that should be okay. And she said, and on the way from San Francisco to Boston, there shouldn't be anybody sitting in between you and the other person, probably. So you're probably going to be fine. Okay. So I board the flight, and funny enough, this is one thing that I really wasn't expecting. So 3-4-3. How many footwells do you expect to be in each section? You expect 3 and then 4 and then 3, right? That's not how that worked. There are only 3 footwells in each section. So the 2 people in the middle of the 4 are expected to share a footwell. So this is weird, but thankfully nobody did sit next to me on that one side.
Okay, so that's nice at that
So
point.
I had a footwell to myself, which was I didn't realize was an unexpected pleasure. So I had that, and I basically tried to get a little bit of sleep and tried to rest and made it back to San Francisco. My bag, of course, had been loaded onto the first flight, and I wasn't sure if it was going to make it to the second flight, but I think it was at the point where it was either when I was in the air or maybe when I got to SFO that I checked my Find My, because I'm on the Apple ecosystem. Not an ad, but it's just who I am, folks. And it said, your bag is in Sydney. And I went, but I'm not in Sydney. That's okay. I only put stuff in there that I wasn't worried about. And again, not an ad, but if you're ever traveling internationally and you're checking a bag or just checking a bag in general, please put an air tag in it. Trust me, you'll thank me for this later. So so I get to SFO, ask them about the bag. They're like, yeah, there's nothing we can do until they actually load it onto a plane, but like wait it out. It'll probably be to you in a couple of days. Get onto the flight at San Francisco, sit down. Thankfully, there's nobody sitting in that middle seat. And basically everybody in that section on that flight going to Boston were refugees from the other flight for Airline D that had been trying to get back to Boston as well. So we were all in the same boat. And it's amazing the perspective that you get when you have like a 15 and a half hour flight and then you're flying back from the West Coast, and you're like, 5.5
Right.
hours. That's nothing.
Nothing.
That's a movie and a half. That's fine. And so then it did actually take a couple of days for me to get my bag, but I was able to track it because I had my AirTag. So that was a really useful thing that I had done before I left. And then we get to the part where I'm supposed to get the refund. And when I had asked about it at the gate when I was in Sydney, I said, like, are they going to refund me? Because obviously, if I'm going at economy at the entire way back and I've paid for first class, I expect a refund for that
Right.
difference. And she's like, yeah, well, you're going to have to put in for that. We're not going to give you that automatically. Airline A, by the way, the second that I declined the rebook that they had given me, they just refunded me that half of the trip. So airline D, now I have to go and put in a thing. So I had to wait until I got home, and then I put in the request. And then maybe like a day or two later, I think, they came back and said, yes, we will refund you a little bit less than $1,400. And I'm telling you right now, I don't believe that that's actually the price difference between first class and economy.
No, there's
But
no
they
way.
get to say how much they feel like giving you back, and that's how much they felt like giving me back. So that was a very fun expense report to have to fill in. But
Oh, boy.
but yeah, so eventually I did get home. And I'm grateful at least to Airline D that they did get me home and that I did eventually get my bag. But it was far more stressful than it needed to be. And yeah, and travel is stressful anyway. So when you're going literally halfway around the world from where you live, you need as few stressors as possible.
Right. Ouch.
Yeah, I mean, Max again. Max is an expert of bad travel story. I had quite a few as well. Not to that level, but I had quite a few. So a few thoughts here. First, definitely do go to Australia with your husband at some point. Maybe with a different airline. That was my honeymoon place, and it was magical. So I can only recommend going there. Second element here is you do care about your status, your miles and everything. You're gonna get along with Max just fine on this because he has the same disease where his wife tells him, I don't care about what kind of miles we carry, just go along. And so
Yeah.
you guys gonna have the same
How do we?
understanding.
Why are we flying? Why is it? Why is this trip taking an extra 8 hours so you can get a few miles? Really?
Because I'm going to be able to fly free the next time I want to fly free, or I'm going to get an
Right.
upgrade for the two of
Right.
us.
Right.
So
And
you hate me now, but you'll love me later.
But that's where you guys, real frequent travelers, make a difference because I accumulate miles and miles and miles. I've never been able to transfer this into even an ice cream. It just doesn't work. They tell you maybe you get an extra footwell with the miles I've got, but you don't have a ticket. So, but I get the point. I must say, your airline A, they suffered from bad luck, but I don't
Yeah.
really see bad CX. I mean, the first thing you said is they immediately, when they say they cancel the flight, they immediately had a plan B. Most airlines don't have a plan B. They say, call us, send us an email, figure it out on your own. They don't say, here is a plan B, we've booked it for you. So it's not great, but I don't know why they canceled in the first place. Maybe they're guilty, but it feels like they did what they could. And second thing is they refunded it immediately. Most airlines don't do that either. You're going to have to battle. So airline A, bad luck, but pretty good. Airline C, I don't really know whether it was good or bad. I also don't know why they canceled. But airline D, guys, I mean, if you know you're booking someone on the expensive seats and you don't have a seat for them, do you really need them to come and beg for information? Can't you be a little bit proactive and tell them there's a problem and come up with solutions? Go ahead.
I have one question, Judy.
Yeah.
When you got moved to that, you were in the first class lounge. Why didn't you go talk to the people there instead of going to the gate?
So I was already at the gate. I'd gone to the lounge. I dropped my bag and like checked in, dropped my bag, went through security, and they had said, go to the lounge. You can have breakfast there. It's like, great. All right, I'll go to the lounge. And so I went to the lounge, had breakfast, worked on a PowerPoint like you do. And then when it was time to go to the gate just before boarding, I went to the gate. So I was exactly where I was supposed to be based upon the next step in that literal journey. And it
Okay.
was at the
Okay.
gate where um, where things were falling down. That was like the beginning of the falling down experience. Up until then, it was fine. And I think there are a bunch of things there. So to Julienne's point, like if someone's flying first class, you have paid more. You should be doing something to try and proactively get them into whatever they need to get into. Now,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
good that there were options in the app, but the fact that I didn't get a ping when they already had my mobile number, they already had, like, the app was literally installed and up and running in the background. So there was no reason, like, they didn't ping me to let me know, hey, the status of this flight has changed or anything's going on. So it was very much like you have to look for the visual indicators of all these people lining up to go, oh no, I have to go deal with this.
What's going on? Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
going on?
That's
And then the
not
fact that it
okay.
suggested or like offered to me flights that it didn't actually have seats on is distressing. And then the whole thing of like it not even just it didn't have seats in my fare class, it didn't have seats.
Right.
Like that doesn't it intuitively it doesn't make any sense. So I think there were a bunch of things that sort of went wrong there. But airline A, yes, that was in fact a it was just bad luck for them. They had a medical emergency that caused, it was basically, think of them as flying a bus
Mm.
between LA and Sydney, and the bus had to divert to like Honolulu or something like that on the way down because there was a medical emergency, and so they just didn't have a bus waiting to be able to take everybody back. So that sucks. But they did notify me, they did offer me another option, and then they did immediately refund me my money when I said, no, I don't want that. So airline A gets full marks for having done all the things that I would have expected them to do, short of bringing me the plane that I wanted the first time. Airline B and C are completely innocent because they were brought into it by airline A, and I chose not to go that route. Airline D got me home, and they got my bag home eventually. But the amount of work that I had to do to get myself onto a flight, to get myself a seat assignment, um, to chase down the refund, to chase down my bag, like all the work that I had to do, there was so much more emotional and physical labor involved in Airline D than absolutely needed to be done, particularly when they already had all my contact information. They already had me on the app. Like I'm
And
in their loyalty program, everything.
the one I just screamed about it, and you gave them $10,000.
I
Yeah,
did.
It's like,
that is
seriously, guys,
I
this
did.
person should be treated like a princess.
I
that is
was
the
when I
thing.
first got there, but then, like, once I got there, that was
Yeah,
once I left the
Yeah.
lounge, or even
See,
really once I left the counter, it didn't matter.
that's
I was just a
that's
schlub.
that's the thing that surprises me is that someone in that lounge wasn't like, ma'am, we've got a problem with a flight. Come, let's talk about you. That's when you're first class international, the lounge should be just really taking care of you.
Well,
I mean, there are multiple breakdowns, but that's one
yeah.
point of breakdown that is surprising to me.
So they
How
might have for
bad it
people who were still in the lounge, but I had already left the lounge at that point because the flight was getting delayed and delayed and delayed. So if I had hung out in the lounge, maybe they would have approached me. But because I had already gone to the gate, because my standard mode is when it's getting close to time to board, I'm going to go to the gate and be ready to board. I wasn't in the lounge for that to happen. So if someone had been waiting in the lounge and was waiting it out, maybe that's fine. But the lounge and the gate weren't like right next to each
Yeah,
other.
yeah,
So
okay.
but the thing is, when you fly first class, you got more space, you got more comfort, you got better food, you got more drinks, you got someone to take care of you. It's great, but it's not worth 10K. The 10K
Right.
come from the fact that they're not here to be serving you when everything goes smooth. The extra value you get is when things go wrong. That's what you're
yes,
paying for, and that's what's missing here. It's I travel mostly economy, not first class, and I'm already upset when they just fuck things up. But if I was paying this kind of money for plane ticket and they can't figure it out, then what am I paying for in the first place? Because if it's just for champagne, let me bring my own champagne
Right.
and salmon next time. It'll be way cheaper, and I'll bring my own chair and footwell. I don't need you guys for that. I need you guys to help me with transportation and comfort. And that's where they fall short.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, like, I think part of that 10K was you're trying to go from Sydney back to Boston, and that's not nearby. Part of it was you're trying to do it that same morning.
Right.
So
Right.
there's an element of that going on. Um, and part of it is because they can. And
Yeah.
airlines, like these days, they're maxing out their capacity. Clearly, they're willing to overbook in for some cases. So I think they feel like they hold a lot of the cards. And like I said, airline A did great, and I will continue to fly airline A and give them my money and all that. Airline D is on my also ran list just because, yeah, they did help me escape from an island continent that I loved being on, but really also wanted to get home to my family. Um, but when it comes down to it, if I'm offered the option of airline A versus airline D for frankly anything, and domestically I can fly either of them, I always start with airline A, and airline D is like third or fourth on my list. It was just because they happened to be one that could get there. And I will say also, airline B, which I did not take, the reason that I did not take them is because their domestic partner, I can't stand. I've always had bad experiences on them. And so that's the only reason that I didn't choose airline B from the get-go. And to a certain extent, maybe I'm kicking myself that I didn't just do that, but like whatever. If nothing else, great story. And I did eventually get home.
Well, if I can add something just for the sake of being therapeutic here. You've lost your luggage on the way back for only a couple of days. It happened to me at least 3 times, and it's always on the way out. So I
Oh,
end up in a city I don't know without a luggage. So your bad luck could have been worse.
oh yeah, 100%.
And I'm
And
taking the
yeah,
AirTag tip. I don't know if it's a good thing because you know where it is, but then you know you can't do anything about it. So it might be another source of frustration. I'm going to think it through, but the AirTag piece
Yeah.
might be a good
Well,
idea.
I think what it does is because sometimes the airline, you say, where's my bag? Like, wow.
How
But at
would I
least,
know?
right,
I don't know. You're in
yeah,
charge.
yeah, exactly.
right.
So
You have possession of it.
yeah, but if you know it's in Sydney, your expectations are different than if you know it's in San Francisco or something like that. So that
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the AirTag thing because you can actually talk to these people and say, well, you don't know where my luggage is. I do. You want me to show you so that
yeah,
you can
it's
give it back?
empowering you. It's
Right.
empowering
And
you, which is
and
really cool.
also I do have to point out like the incredible privilege that I'm talking about here, right? Not everybody can just say like, "Oh, a $10,000 flight. Sure, I'll just whip out a credit card and make that happen." Like it's that that's something that probably not everybody gets to do. And so they would have just taken the option that had been presented by airline B to fly on airlines B and C, and that's fine. Like I get it. Like airline A did what they could, and if you don't have additional money, that's fine. So I the fact that I could whip out a credit card is amazing. And like to your point, Julianne, about like showing up in another city and you don't have your clothes or whatever, being able to just whip out a credit card at, your local department store or whatever and just get something, again, incredible privilege that when we can do that sort of thing. So
This is a good working definition of first world problems.
it is absolutely a first world problem. Me whining about like, oh, escaping from Sydney, right? Like it's kind of insane if you really think about it on the face of it.
Oh, I
But
think
I think the big lessons here are like if we look at what airline A did, the fact that they communicated quickly with me through the channel that they knew that I was going to be paying attention to, that they had a second offer for me, that they refunded my money right away. Like I think airline A did everything that they reasonably could, and I think that that was really fantastic. And I think airline D did some of the things that they could have done, but I think they also fell down a lot on the communications aspect, on just like overall the amount of work that they made me have to do. And regardless of whether I'm paying $10,000 for a first class ticket, or whether I'm paying, a $2,000 for an economy ticket, you deserve to be treated with respect. And I don't think that Airline D did a good enough job of treating any of its customers with respect that day. And so regardless of how much money you put down on the table, that's something that they really just need to fix.
Words of wisdom. The big question we usually have at the end of an episode is, do you feel better about it after speaking it out?
I mean, I think I do, because I'm talking about it with people who understand what it's like to travel internationally and some of the things that we go through. Travel is this wonderful thing that we can do so much more of than we could when we were, kids, because there are so many more flights and airlines and things like that. But it's also incredibly stressful. And it's really helpful to learn tips about, like, how do I do this differently and how do I do it better? Could I have done something differently, so that the next trip out, it's just easier, you're more prepared, your expectations are set. So I think it's always good to talk this stuff out, particularly with people who are international travelers as well.
I think, Max, we need to get Judy and Sheila in a room to talk about how to not lose your credit card when you travel with the AirTag and everything. There is something to do there. Judy, a huge thank you for accepting to be our guest, sharing your story and your words of wisdom. Max, as usual, it was a pleasure having you here. A big thank you for everyone who's been watching today's episode. Loads of learning, and I can only wish that airlines are going to take some notes and fix some of those issues after today's.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
It would. A big thank you, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day, and we shall be talking again very soon. If you do have any questions, any suggestions, any ideas, please send us messages, emails, pigeons, if it takes that, and we'll answer with next month's mailbag. Thanks, everyone, and have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Judy.
Thanks.